Our focus today centers on the Washington Post publication of a report being dubbed the Afghanistan Papers. The report is roughly 2,000 pages of private, closed-door interviews with high-ranking military and political officials. The interviews reveal 4 key takeaways. There's no coherent U.S. policy for Afghanistan. Congress and the public didn't seem interested in how much the war cost. Measuring fatalities is a troubling metric of success, and wartime state-building programs cannot fix underlying social problems. Joining us today to discuss these findings is Kim Field. She's a retired Army Brigadier General who served 4 tours in Afghanistan. She's also the Executive Director of the Alberton Center for Grand Strategy at the Bush School of Government and Public Service. Kim, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Yeah. So first off, I want to ask, what was your experience like serving in Afghanistan?
Well, I started when it first started, right after 9/11. And then I ended 8 months ago. Actually, not even 8 months ago, and left there being the senior advisor to the commander who is there now, General Scott Miller. And between that, I was there during the upsurge and during the downsurge, which happened in very quick succession with each other.
So looking at this report, what's your initial takeaway?
The only thing that really surprised me was that the American public was so surprised. That this was actually big news, because having been involved from the start to basically the current day, I assure you those conversations were happening everywhere. The press did a nice job and constantly asking the right questions. President Obama and President Trump, Doug Lute is mentioned, highlighted in the piece. Everyone raised concerns about our ability to make progress there. So the fact that we weren't making progress, I don't think should have been a surprise to anyone.
What do you think kept the U.S. forces from making any sort of progress in Afghanistan?
Yeah, we never really paid it enough attention. It was the good war at first, and then we quickly sort of lost patience with it, and we quickly diverted to Iraq. Remember that?
I do, yes.
Yeah. And then we had a reluctant president that gave us 33,000 more soldiers in 2009, but took them out by 2012. So these kinds of things demand patience. They demand an investment that is not too high, so that we can have patience. And they demand that we do things the way the host country wants to do it. So we made a lot of mistakes. We had as many commanders there, almost as many commanders as we've had years there.
Right.
So you can't have a consistent policy unless you have some steady state, consistent investment.
As far as any kind of strategy goes, is there any way you see this wrapping up anytime soon with our involvement in Afghanistan?
Well, I think the only way forward is the peace process. And that's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 2 steps back. It's going to be a long thing. But I think we have to keep our eye on the ball, and that is that we went to Afghanistan to protect the homeland. Are we still there to protect the homeland? That's the question, right? My boss would say absolutely. There is ISIS in Afghanistan. There's Al-Qaeda in partnership with the Taliban is still there. Now, how much we invest to keep their heads down is the question.
Gotcha.
Right? But the only way out of this, and we've been saying this for years now, is that there's no military solution there. So don't put it all in the military to fix this. Right? The solution is a political one. It's a negotiated settlement. And what we need to be is very firm with the Taliban leaders who are sitting fat and happy, literally fat and happy, in Qatar, in Doha, Qatar, negotiating on behalf of their fighters who are dying in Afghanistan. And we need to be firm with the Afghan government and the political actors in Afghanistan to say, you've got to be united. We need to be firm with both of them to say, you guys have much more at stake in this fight than we do. We will protect the homeland. We'll figure that out. America can do anything. Right.
Now, why do you think the state building process throughout all this hasn't exactly worked as the solution for this?
People, I think, got confused saying we were there to rebuild Afghanistan. We were not. We were there to protect the homeland, and the way to protect the homeland is to make sure that country was stable.
Important distinction there.
Important distinction. We got a little carried away. We tried to do way too much. We should have listened to the Afghan people. We should have built the army they needed, not the mini image of ourselves. Never were they ever going to be able to handle the technology that we depend on, but we made them dependent on it.
Yeah.
So we misstepped in certain ways because we're not great at this. You know?
Right.
We're not great at this.
You brought up one other thing I forgot to ask you about spending.
Yeah.
Obviously, this has been a very expensive war for the U.S.
It has.
What do you think about the use of that money and, like you said, figuring out the best way to manage and dwindle that down?
Yeah, we spent way too much. We knew it at the time. My boss at the time, it was General Dave Rodriguez. The first project he put me on was money as a weapon system. In other words, it's a thing to be considered on the battlefield. It causes corruption. We made the problem much worse with all the money that we put in that place.
Yeah.
They didn't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Now we need to bring our forces down. The commander now, General Scott Miller, can do this with less. He's a very experienced and savvy warfighter with a lot of strategic acumen about what it takes.
Yeah.
We can reduce the amount of money we're spending there and the number of troops there.
Gotcha. So as we get closer to possibly the end of this conflict, I'm sure there's still a lot more to talk about. Kimberly Field, thank you so much for joining us here today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very
welcome.
welcome.
Texas welcome. Thanks.